The traditional American lawn. Is there a low maintenance native alternative to our traditional American lawn? Why would we even care? Well, the traditional American lawn uses a lot of water. We want to keep it green and nice looking. We have the image in our head of what that lawn should look like, and it's green. Requires a lot of mowing. Some people enjoy to be on a mower, some people don't, but nonetheless, that mowing is doing a couple other things. It's doing nothing good for the environment. It's not even making our grass healthier, but it's also emitting a lot of carbon dioxide and doing nothing good for our environment. But then it's also expensive. So you get to put fuel in the mower, you get to maintain the mower, all of these things. Pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, you get to use these if you want to keep your lawn looking pure and clean without those weeds. Also has no wildlife benefit to it, or very little. The insects, the native insects, native animals are adapted to native plants, and that's just about as simply put as it can be. So introduce grass lawns, very little benefit to our insects, our pollinators, our wildlife. So with all of these downsides to a traditional lawn, there's a lot of interest in what could we do that's a low maintenance lawn, doesn't require a lot of these inputs, doesn't require a lot of mowing, and is native so that it has benefit to the environment. So that is one thing that Cornell Botanical Gardens actually undertook was an experiment to see what would work. And so their goal, they wanted to have little to no mowing. Okay, well that sounds good. They wanted to not have to use herbicides, pesticides, insecticides, any of those pesticides, the ides we might call them. They wanted to not have to water, if at all, very little. They also wanted to have minimal weeding that needed to be required on the planting. That's no fun to be out there weeding if you're not using the herbicide to get the weeds out. You don't want to be out there by hand probably doing it either. Then they wanted it 85% native, and again, that's giving us this benefit to our native insects, our native pollinators, our native wildlife as much as possible in a lawn situation. And lastly, they wanted it to be able to be grown from seed, just because that's a whole lot easier than doing plugs and that sort of thing. They came up with two winners, and they were both poverty grasses. So Danthonia is the genus of those plants, and one is spicata and the other is compressa. And so Danthonia spicata is what I actually have growing around me here right now. This is a natural stand of it. These pine trees were planted, but this is a natural stand of the Danthonia spicata, or poverty grass. We have done nothing to treat this as a lawn, nothing. The management in here is really nothing at all. So we've done nothing to encourage it to be a lawn, but you can see the tendency, it's all really quite short. And if we applied a couple mowings to it a year, we would have something of a traditional lawn look. Now they say beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So, before you step into any of these things, you want to make sure that it's what your idea of beauty is. So since we're in a native stand of this Danthonia spicata, or the poverty grass, it's good to learn from nature. There's a concept called biomimicry, mimicking biology, mimicking nature. And that's really what we want to do is we create this lawn that's a low maintenance native lawn. We want to learn from nature, and we want to apply those same principles to our habitat that we're creating for ourselves. Okay, so one, this is naturally low growing, so it lends itself to lawns. But then what I start to think about is get the right plant in the right place. There's plants that are adapted to many different situations, but it's not the same plant that likes it wet, that likes it dry, that likes it in full shade, that likes it in full sun. So get the right plant in the right place. So what is it? Where would we choose to plant poverty grass? And or if we're making amendments to the soil, what would we do to it to make it match? Let's look at what this likes. So I'm obviously in a shaded part. It's not full shade. It is dappled shade. I'd say we're, 70% shade out here. If we get too much shade, the poverty grass is not going to really thrive. But we've got quite a bit of shade out here. So it definitely doesn't mind shade, also doesn't mind full sun. Just out to my left out here, you can't really see it, but there is poverty grass out here in this open field, and it's just naturally occurring native as well. So while I think of it in the shaded situation, the full sun situation seems to work just fine for it as well. Soils. Wet, dry, somewhere in the middle. Where does it fall? I would definitely say this is a high dry ridge right here. There's going to be a lot of rocks in the soil just naturally. And so we're definitely in a dry site. Poverty grass loves a dry site. I'm not sure you can get it too dry for poverty grass. Then on the flip side, you can get it too wet for poverty grass. Poverty grass is not going to like it where you're like, if you're mowing it now, or if you think about mowing it, if you're like, oh, I have to be careful with the mower there after a rain. You can drive anywhere else on the yard, but not there. That's a wet spot. Poverty grass won't like that. You better choose something else for that situation. Poverty grass also seems to do fine in that Goldilocks soil, the one that's in the middle, not too wet, not too dry. So poverty grass will do fine in that situation as well. So definitely the drier side of the spectrum into the average soils, and then from pretty full shade, but not full shade, into pretty full sun. Anywhere in that spectrum, poverty grass is going to like it. So what Cornell did to create this environment is they came in and stripped off the topsoil because it had lawn growing on it. So they stripped off the lawn, and by doing so, they took off a lot of the organic matter. So this made it drier. It also had the benefit of removing a lot of the weed seeds, because a lot of the weed seeds are found in the topsoil. And not only did it make it drier, but it removed a lot of the nutrients as well. That organic matter, the dark colors in the soil, is what holds the nutrients. It's like a sponge for water and nutrients. And so we can make our situation artificially drier by removing those. And that's what they did at Cornell. And they also added some sand and limestone. And again, the goal is to decrease the fertility and to make it drier. And that's what they did. So that might be something that is applicable in your site. If you're in that neighborhood of like fairly dry, but you want to go ahead and remove that topsoil, it might be a good thing. And then to amend it might or might not be a good thing too. But again, you know your site better than I do. What you're trying to do is get to that dry and either shaded or not shaded situation. That's not so important, but you want it dry and you want it low fertility. And another benefit that Cornell found with the low fertility is that the typical lawn weeds just don't thrive in that low fertility situation. So there's another benefit to stripping those nutrients in the form of that topsoil off. If environmental concerns are one of our big concerns on a native lawn situation where we're trying to do a native low maintenance lawn, I actually start to think about diversity of plants, because nature doesn't love monocultures. She doesn't like to be bare, and she doesn't like monocultures much either. In fact, things just naturally come back in. And you'll have that. Things will come in from the seed bank, kind of depending on your situation, but it's very likely that things will come in from the seed bank, and that may be, those may be just fine in your situation. But also there's things that we could plant, other things that are native that we could plant that would complement the poverty grass. And you see a lot of those, and again, this is just a natural stand, but you see those around me. What Cornell found is that we don't want to mow our grass too short. When we have a native grass lawn, we don't want to mow it too short. So they said 6 to 8 inches was their magic height. The grass here is probably shorter than theirs was, so you might be able to mow it a little shorter, but we're really not wanting to whack around on those leaves of the grass because it really stresses it. So if we can mow it our 6 to 8 inches, but wait a minute, your lawnmower probably doesn't go that low. And so that may be a problem you need to think through. Other options would be to use your weed whacker, and you can, of course, control the height because you're the one out there holding it up off the ground, controlling gravity. So your weed whacker may be an option, or a scythe could also be an option. So again, we're doing this once or twice a year. If these seed heads don't bother you, I don't guess you would have to mow it right now. But of course, they're adding height, and if we could take it down to 6 to 8 inches, that would work just fine. Now, our experience on the poverty grass is that if you mow it too early, when it first sticks up its seed head, it will probably stick up another seed head. May or may not in your situation, so you can experiment with it and learn. But you may actually want to wait till it's actually kind of made seed. The seeds have actually fallen out of this already. But if you waited until it made seed, it's not likely to go ahead and sprout up more flowers. You can pick up some of these pretty spring and early summer wildflowers in the area as well. And we'll talk about diversity a little bit more here in a minute. But if you do it too early, you're going to have to do it more often. So it may be a benefit to wait there a little bit. So this is our parvati grass here. You can see it's very low growing. Put my hand in it, what is it, 4 inches tall. So if we were to mow it at 6 to 8, obviously we're not going to cut even the tips of these leaves off, and that would be perfect. It also, any of the diversity, any of the wildflowers or other grasses that are out here, it's also not cutting them off too short, which can get stressful for a plant. But you can just see it has a nice green color here. We're like mid-June. So weather has warmed up. Of course, it's went to seed. And what we did here in this area is actually remove these seed heads. You can kind of see one that was sticking up here to make it look like this area was mowed here. So naturally low growing plant, nice green color to it. Not grass green like you might think of. And then down at the base, one of the things I actually used to kind of identify parvati grass is these curly brown leaves down at the base. They're kind of hard to see, but you can kind of see the curliness of that leaf there. So they kind of have those leaves this winter. These leaves will curl up and turn brown. Now, when I think of parvati grass and I think of planting it in a monoculture of a lawn, I really start to think about monocultures are not that healthy of a situation. So would we be better off to add some more diversity? And this comes back to the beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but who can't think a bright yellow flower like these is not pretty? I don't know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, so you get to decide that. But it could be something to add some other grasses to it and also add some of the native forbs, and that's just a fancy word for wildflowers, to the planting as well. And then if you time them right and really think about, okay, I don't want anything that's too tall. I don't want them this, I want them down here. And then I can mow them, they will bloom early. I can mow them off when I, say right now, if I were to come mow it off, or just a little bit after these yellow flowers faded, mow them off, and then, maybe something else that would bloom in the fall. Or you have to decide what beauty is to you and what kind of height you're willing to tolerate. But some of the native diversity that you could put into a situation like this would be things like violets. And any of these plants that I mentioned, it's going to depend on your site. So if you've got a little more mesic site, there may even be different species of these plants. Like violets, there's ones that like it drier, like it more mesic. And again, mesic means not too wet, not too dry. There's things that like it in the shade. There's things that like it in full sun. So back to the list of wildflowers that we could add to this. We could do things like violets. Of course, the yellow one, I forgot to tell you what its name is. This is yellow wingstem or yellow crownbeard. Pretty, not too tall, likes some shade. And I can tell you the characteristics of each of these plants, but the reality is it's hard to remember that many plants after a while. So there's a tool on our Hamilton Native Outpost website that you can actually go to, and there's other tools out there as well, that you can go to and you can filter for the plants that are within a certain height range and bloom in a certain time period. And then you don't have to remember all these factors to pick out the plants that you might want to put in there. Okay, so violets, the yellow wingstem, yellow crownbeard. Other things you might want to put in there would be shooting star, really pretty pink or white flowers. Hyacinths, both the wild hyacinth and the prairie hyacinth. Again, I think of those in slightly different soils, so make sure you're paying attention to that. Rose verbena is a beautiful, smells really good, attracts a lot of pollinators. A lot of these attract pollinators real well. A few others. Wild geranium, likes a shady site. Wild bergamot or woodland bergamot. And there are different, on the wild bergamot, there are different varieties. Some of the shorter ones might be the ones that, and a lot of times, they're not considered separate species, so a lot of times people don't actually keep track. It's all Monarda fistulosa, but we actually have both a shorter one, which stays about waist high, and there's a taller one that can get, up around shoulder high. So that shorter one could be in addition to it. I mean, there's mountain mints that bloom later, and it all depends on your mowing schedule. So to really think through how much untidiness you can take will kind of influence which of the species of wildflowers you might put in. Not only can we mix wildflowers with our parvati grass, but we could also mix some other grasses with it. And again, we need to pick grasses that are adapted to the site that we have or to the amendments that we're going to make to the site. Buffalo grass, a great low-growing grass that's often used in lawns. Again, naturally low-growing, loves full sun, so I would not plant buffalo grass out here in the shade. Loves full sun and dry. And so if your site is that, you might mix the poverty grass, the buffalo grass, and then some of the wildflowers with it. So there's other grasses that we can mix with it as well. It's just kind of a matter of thinking, again, and I've said this over and over, but it's so important. Think through your site. What are your soils like and what are the amendments that you're going to make? What is the sun or shade situation? And is it different? Is there a sunny spot here and a shady spot there? So think that through. Think through the fertility situation. Can you make it less fertile? Because a lot of times native plants don't love the high fertility situations that we have in a lawn situation. Or maybe we just don't bring the topsoil in. We just leave it as subsoil if it's a new construction site. And then think through your goals. Like, how often do I want to mow it? When do I think I might want to mow it? Those sort of details will help you to pick out things that, it'd be really disappointing to mow down your wildflower that was going to bloom next week every year. And so if you think that through, then maybe you just don't spend the money on that particular wildflower seed. If something pretty but not necessarily a traditional lawn look is what you're after, if you're looking at these wing stems back here and you're like, I don't care if it's that height all year long, another option would actually be to do like a wildflower meadow. And again, it depends on what your view of beauty is, what is allowed in your area even sometimes. But you could do a wildflower meadow where you've got the native grasses and wildflowers scattered throughout. And my idea of beauty is a mix that's high in wildflowers in one of these wildflower meadows. But my sister, she says, I love it when there's a lot of grasses. I love that texture and then a few wildflowers in it. But if we're thinking a wildflower meadow, and it all depends on your soils, the wetter the soil, the taller the plants tend to get. But a lot of times we can pick out a nice mix of 20 species of native wildflowers and 5 species of native grasses that come in this waist-high range of height. And so we can, and of course our goal there is not to mow it down. Our goal is to have blooms in spring, summer, and fall, blooms through the summer. If we mow it down, we're really going to limit the blooms that we have later in the season. And at some point it can cause stress to those plants if they're not, plants that grow this tall don't love to be mowed off to the ground level. So it's a whole different concept than a lawn, yet it's a very aesthetically pleasing thing as well to have a wildflower meadow. Wildflower meadows are a lot lower maintenance than like a wildflower garden where you have the mulch in between and whatnot. But of course, nothing is maintenance free to maintain it to a visual quality that we want. So wildflower meadows are another choice. If those are an interest, we have mixes like dry and rocky mix, prairie patchwork mix, wet meadow mix. You can check these out on our website. I'm Elizabeth with Hamilton Native Outpost, and here at Hamilton Native Outpost, we love grasses like poverty grass. We love native plants. We raise the seed of the native plants, and so you can find out more about the seed, get the seed on our website. But it's just a real passion of ours to be innovative with these plants, to share the knowledge of how to use these plants, how to benefit nature with other people.